Hey there folks, welcome back. I'm Rob Franek, Editor-in-Chief here at the Princeton Review, and today, my friends, we are sharing the top 9 AP Psychology concepts that you need to know to master before exam day come this May. But that all said, my friends, before we get started, let's do a super fast overview of the test itself. Now, the AP Psychology exam is divided into 2 sections. Section 1 counts for approximately 2/3 of your overall grade and consists of 100 multiple choice questions to be completed in a whopping 70 minutes of time. Friends, if you're a math geek like me, that turns out to be less than 1 minute per question. But fear not, my friends, we're going to cover it all today. Section 2 of the exam itself consists of 2 free-response questions, and together they count for that final 1/3 of your grade. You'll get 50 full minutes to complete that section. Friends, let's remember that in just 2 hours of time, the exam is designed to test you on your ability to do 3 things. Number 1, connect psychological theories and concepts to real life scenarios. Number 2, understand and interpret data. Number 3, to analyze psychological research studies. Now, while the exam itself will certainly cover a ton of information, let's take a deep breath here, my friends, because we have you covered. Grab a pen, grab a notebook, grab whatever your preferred note-taking device is, and let's dig into these concepts so that you are well ready before exam day. Concept number 1, the scientific foundations of psychology. Folks, at its most basic level, psychology is the study of behavior and the mind. It seeks to describe and predict and explain behavior along with the mental processes underlying behavior. To understand modern psychology, you'll need to first understand its scientific foundations and history. That will include understanding the contributions of historic scientists and founders of psychology like Charles Darwin and William Wundt and William James, and of course Dorothea Dix. You'll also need to know about the various branches of modern psychology, including biological psychology, behaviorism, cognitive psychology, and social psychology. The exam will also test you on psychological research methods, including correlation and clinical research, experimental design, as well as statistical methods. That leads us to concept number 2, the biological basis of behavior. Now, physiological psychology is the study of behavior and mental processes as influenced by biology. For the exam, you'll need to understand the interaction of inherited traits, the environment and evolution in shaping behavior. You should know the structures and functions of biological systems, including neuroanatomy, the endocrine system, the nervous system, neural transmission, and of course, behavioral genetics. You should also be familiar with the different imaging techniques used to examine interrelationship between the brain and behavior, such as EEGs and MRIs, and of course, CAT scans. Now, there are other concepts that you should be familiar with as well, so study up on the states of consciousness, including sleeping and dreaming, and familiarize yourself with the clinical uses of hypnosis and meditation techniques like mindful-based stress reduction. Now, you'll be familiar with that acronym, MBSR. And finally, you should aim to understand the various types of psychoactive drugs, such as amphetamines as well as hallucinogens. You should know how they affect the central nervous system, the brain, and of course overall behavior, and how they contribute to both addiction as well as drug dependence. Concept number 3, friends, sensation and perception. Now, the AP Psychology exam will also examine how we as humans use our senses to process the world around us and convert those observations into perceptions that influence how we think and how we behave. While sensation and perception questions will only count for about 6% of your overall grade, every point counts here, my friends, so be sure to understand the basic principles of how humans experience stimuli and the mechanisms of our 5 senses. That leads me to concept number 4, which is learning. Now, friends, it is deeply, deeply important to understand how humans and other animals learn as a result of experience. There are various learning methods that you should be familiar with, including classical conditioning and operant conditioning and non-associative learning and social learning. You should also know influential researchers like Ivan Pavlov and P.F. Skinner and Albert Bandura. And most importantly, you should understand their theories of learning and the result of their famous learning experiments. Concept number 5, it is cognitive psychology, and it's so important here. Questions related to cognitive psychology could make up a whopping 17% of your exam. So folks, you'll want to understand the complexities of how memory and language and cognition and other mental processes affect human behavior. You should study up on the cognitive as well as the physiological processes that make up memory and be able to distinguish between the 3 memory storage areas. Number 1, sensory, number 2, short-term, and of course number 3, long-term, according to the modal model. You'll also need to understand the problem-solving strategies that humans use, such as divergent and convergent thinking, heuristics, and of course insight. This also means understanding biases and errors in thinking, such as hindsight bias and confirmation bias. Next, you should know the processes of learning and using language. This will include understanding the stages by which children acquire language, Chomsky's transformation grammar system, as well as the theory of linguistic relativity. And lastly, you'll need to know the ways in which intelligence is defined and measured. Understand the types of tests designed to measure sociological characteristics and intelligence, as well as how psychologists ensure reliability, validity, and standardization. So be sure to familiarize yourself with psychologists, like Charles Spearman and of course Robert Sternberg and the great Howard Gardner, as well as their contributions to our understanding of intelligence. That brings me to concept number 6, which is developmental psychology. Now, developmental psychology can be defined as the study of the changes that occur in people's behavior and mental processes over their lifespan. Now, friends, the College Board will expect that you know about the physical and the social and the cognitive developments that occur in childhood, and that'll include understanding stages of motor development, beginning with the rudimentary reflexes, as well as progressing through the learning of specialized movements. But you should also be prepared to analyze different theories of childhood cognitive development, including the stages described by Jean Piaget's developmental theory. But beyond childhood development, you should also understand adolescent as well as adult development and its challenges. Now, Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development was the first theory to assert that development is a lifespan process. But Erikson's theory is not the only social development theory. Be sure to study the contributions of psychologists like Harry and Margaret Harlow, John Bowlby, who is the father of attachment theory, and of course, Mary Ainsworth. You should also take time to review theories of moral development. And lastly, you should be familiar with Freud's psychosexual development as well. Concept number 7, friends, this one is motivation, emotion, and personality. By testing, you should understand, of course, social, biological, humanistic, and cognitive theories of motivation. This will include understanding concepts such as intrinsic and extrinsic factors of motivation, cognitive dissonance, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You'll also need to understand theories of emotion, like James Lange theory, and of course the Cannon-Bard theory, and the Schachter-Singer, and this is a 2-factor theory. Friends, next, you should know about stress, specifically how people praise and respond to stressors in everyday life. You'll need to be knowledgeable about the physiological responses to stress itself, including fight or flight, as well as the general adoption syndrome. Now remember, research into stress has already revealed that people generally show one of 2 different types of behavior pattern in response to stress. Type A pattern, type B pattern. Be sure to understand the differences between the 2 patterns. And lastly, you should be a near expert on personality theories by testing, especially on psychoanalytic theories of Sigmund Freud, the first and most influential personality psychologist. You'll also need to understand the personality theories of Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, and of course, Carl Rogers. And that is just to name a few. And friends, while we're at it, let's be sure to study the tests and assessments used to measure personality, including the Eysenck Personality Inventory and 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire. Concept number 8, my friends, we're nearly done. This is clinical psychology, and again, so important. It should come as no surprise that the AP Psychology exam includes questions about how psychologists evaluate and study and treat psychological disorders. Therefore, you should know the standards for diagnosing psychological disorders. Now, folks, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, that's the DSM-5, is the American Psychiatric Association's handbook for the identification and classification of behavioral disorders. Study the major categories of behavioral disorders, including but not limited to neurodevelopmental, schizophrenic, bipolar, depressive, anxiety, dissociative disorders. Now, once you understand the various disordered behaviors, you'll also need to understand the treatment options and methods used to treat those disorders, including psychoanalysis and humanistic therapy, behavioral therapy, cognitive therapy, and as we've discussed already or noted before, biological therapy. You should also be familiar with other modes of therapy such as group and couples and family therapy. And that brings us, my friends, to the last concept, number 9, social psychology. Now, social psychology is the study of people in interaction with each other. So you'll need to understand how social identities are formed and how they affect self-concept. Ethnocentrism, assimilation, and culture shock are ideas that you should know and know well. You'll also need to understand group dynamics, including conformity and compliance and obedience to authority. And finally, you should know about aggression and antisocial behavior, including discrimination, prejudice, stereotypes, and dehumanization. Friends, it sounds like a lot, we know it, but friends, you have so got this. And as we've talked about many, many times on these videos over the last months, practice here is your friend. Be sure to check out our AP Psychology prep books. Our premium edition here gives you access to 5 full-length practice tests. And as always, my friends, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you're taking the AP Psychology exam, please do leave us a comment and let us know. As always, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to our channel for the latest updates on standardized tests, including all things AP, as well as college admission, extracurricular study tips, and much, much more. Rob Franek signing off for today. Be well, friends. Take care.